Hi! In this lesson, we continue learning the hours of service regulations in detail, referring to the rules set forth by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Let's start reviewing this topic from the very beginning, like we didn't even go over it in the previous lesson. The hours of service provisions focus on when and how long a driver is allowed to be on the job by setting specific limits on the amount of time a driver can operate a truck, and the total number of hours a driver can be on the job before he or she is prohibited from using the commercial vehicle. You must always follow the four limits. These are the 14-hour work window, the 11-hour driving limit, the 30-minute break requirement, as well as the 60-hour per 7-day or 70-hour per 8-day work limits. Let's break down each limit separately. The 14-hour work window. This window is generally considered a daily restriction. For 18 consecutive hours, a driver is allowed to operate a vehicle and do any other job-related activities. After 14 consecutive hours, a driver may not work or use the vehicle for work again until he or she has rested for another 10 consecutive hours. Driving is limited to the 14-hour period even if the driver has time off from work, such as lunch break or nap, during those 14 hours. This means that nothing can prolong this period. If the driver has started his working hours, worked for 1 hour and had nothing else to do all day, his 14 hours are still ticking, and he will not be able to resume work later. For example, the driver had 10 continuous hours of rest and started work at 6 a.m. He can no longer drive his truck after 8 p.m. that evening, which is 14 hours after he started work. He can do other things that don't involve using his truck after 8 p.m. No one can really stop him from that, but he can no longer drive the truck until he has rested for another 10 consecutive hours. I hope that's clear. Let's go to the next one. The 11-hour driving limit. During the 14 consecutive hours mentioned above, a driver is allowed to drive his truck for no more than 11 hours. The driver may spend a total of 11 hours driving during the 14-hour period, however, he's not allowed to drive for more than 8 hours without a break. After 8 hours of continuous driving, the driver is required to take a break for at least 30 minutes. Example. The driver has been resting for 10 consecutive hours. He then arrived at work at 6 a.m. and drove from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's 8 hours behind the wheel. He then took a 30-minute break as required and then can drive another 3 hours until 6:30 p.m. That's a total of 11 hours driving plus 30 minutes of break time. After that, he cannot drive again until he has rested again for at least 10 consecutive hours. He can do other work after 6:30 p.m. because he still hasn't used all of the 14 working hours, but he can no longer drive a commercial vehicle on public roads with the purpose of approaching a pickup or delivery location, meaning he cannot use the truck for work. From this point, it's very easy to define the 30-minute rest break requirement. Hours of service regulations require that once 8 hours have elapsed since the start of continuous driving, the driver must take at least 30 minutes break before starting to drive again. It doesn't mean that the driver must wait 8 hours before taking a break. The rule simply suggests that 8 hours is a maximum driving time without a single break. The driver may take as many breaks as he wants. For example, if he drives for 1 hour and then takes a 30-minute break, he then has another 8 hours of driving before he is required to take another break of another 30 minutes. It's not all that complicated, right? And finally, the 60 or 70-hour work week limit. Pay attention, this one is a little bit tricky. In addition to the limits described above, there is a 60 or 70-hour limit. This limit is based on a 7 or 8-day period, starting at the time specified by a motor carrier to begin a 24-hour work period. This limit is called a weekly limit. However, it's not based on a set week, such as Monday through Sunday. The limit is based on a rolling or floating 7 or 8-day period. The hours of the oldest day in the floating period are deducted at the end of each new day. For example, if a driver works on a schedule of 70 hours per 8 days, when a new day begins, the current day would be the newest day in your 8-day period, and the hours the driver worked 9 days ago are excluded from the calculation. Let's look at an example of a driver's schedule. As an example, in the table you see on the screen, the driver has accumulated a total of 70 work hours over an 8-day period. Considering that this driver works under the 70 hours per 8-day schedule, he is currently in full compliance of the hours of service rules. When the driver goes into the next day of the cycle, Thursday, September the 9th, the hours from day 1 of the cycle are deleted from the calculation, and the driver will calculate his or her hours already from day 2 to day 9, so Thursday to Thursday. This is exactly what I mean when I say that it's a rolling cycle. It's based on the past 8 days from today. So in our example, 14 hours from September 1 were excluded and he was able to work again. He worked 14 hours on September 9 and now he again has a total of 70 hours worked, which is still in compliance with hours of service regulations. Question for you. Can the driver work another 14 hours the next day, September the 10th? Pause the video for a moment and give it a little thought. Ready? If you said he can't, you were correct. As you can see, he only worked 6 hours on September 2, so that's the amount of hours that will be deducted when the new day starts. If he drives another 14 hours on September 10, he will go over the allowed 70-hour limit and will be in violation of the hours of service regulations. All the exact same rules apply to the 60-hour, 7-day driver schedule. This schedule is used by companies where drivers generally do not operate their commercial vehicles every single day of the week. Most of the companies you will work with operate on a 70-hour per 8-day working schedule. So, in our example, the driver is already at the limit of his weekly working hours. It would be nice to reset those hours and start from a clean slate. Luckily, such an option exists. It's called a 34-hour reset. The hours of service regulations allow a carrier to restart the 60-hour or the 70-hour cycle by having the driver spend 34 or more consecutive hours free from work. After the driver has done a 34-hour reset, his or her hours are restarted from zero, and they have the full 60 or 70 hours available to them again. The 34-hour restart is an optional, not a mandatory regulatory provision. Example: if your carrier operates on the 70-hour 8-day limit and the driver works 14 hours a day for 5 consecutive days, he has worked 70 hours. He won't be able to drive again until his total work hours fall below the 70-hour mark. However, if he decides to take advantage of the 34-hour reset, he will be able to get behind the wheel immediately after his 34 hours break from work. Typically, drivers take a 34-hour reset on the weekends. For example, a driver delivers a load on Friday. The dispatcher can find him another short load with a pickup on Friday and a delivery on Monday. The driver will pick up that load and go start his 34-hour reset. When the rest period is over, he will start moving the load, deliver the load on Monday morning, and be ready to pick up the next load. Easy. We're done. This seems like a lot of information. If you're still uncertain about how all of this works, I suggest watching this whole module again. On the second try, when you already know what we're talking about, you will absorb and arrange the information in your brain more effectively. Remember, all of this is provided just for your understanding. A dispatcher must know all these rules and use them for load booking and scheduling, but he's not the one following them. The driver bears the responsibility for following hours of service. Never in your work will you have to sit down and calculate working hours on a piece of paper like we did in the example. In most cases, you will simply call the driver and ask him, like, hey, how many hours do you have left today? Or something like, hey, do we have enough time or enough hours to do another short load this week? See, it's very simple. But you're here to become a true professional and get prepared for any work scenario. So make sure you learn all these rules before you proceed.